How many of you know the name Ezekiel Mathis? Well, that's what we do on this channel. We tell the stories of those that were never told. My name is Cameron. Welcome to True Red Crime. This is the case of baby Ezekiel. Now, on May the 18th, 2011, around 8:30 p.m., emergency services arrived at the house of Ezekiel Mathis. This was in Hillsborough County, Florida. The call was made by multiple people when Mathis came running out of her apartment, screaming at the top of her lungs, "My baby, my baby." Witnesses watched as the young 21-year-old mother broke down outside her home, and the paramedics rushed the 1-year-old infant who wasn't breathing to the hospital. See, the paramedics determined that Ezekiel was experiencing cardiac arrest and was flatlined when they arrived on the scene. Once Ezekiel made it to the University Community Hospital, he was declared dead at 12:08 a.m., May the 19th. Multiple individuals had attempted CPR, but there was no saving the child from death. The medical examiner's home office declared the death a homicide. This tragedy could have been avoided had Zwaziki followed a safety plan set in place after her 2-year-old daughter, whose name is unknown, had been taken away by the state due to physical mistreatment by Swaziki's boyfriend, Damarcus Kirkland Williams. He is the main suspect in this case. And who would have thought a 21-year-old would be this prone to violence? Muppet. Damarcus had been seen by multiple witnesses and security camera footage, striking the young girl with a blunt object at a public park around 2 weeks earlier, having grown irritated of that child and Ezekiel's crying. Witnesses also claimed they saw Damarcus quivering Ezekiel violently when the infant would not calm down. Swaziki's daughter, her only other child that was still with her, was taken into custody on May 7, 2011, 11 days before Ezekiel died. One child is gone, another one's in custody. What? Why did the mother not take action sooner? The daughter that was taken had marks on her private area, but there were no SA allegations. She also had swollen feet marks on her legs and arms and a bloodshot eye with a mark under it. After her daughter was taken away, Swaziki agreed to a safety plan that wouldn't allow Damarcus anywhere near Ezekiel or her residence, and forced her to participate and comply with the children's first response team. However, she did not abide by this plan and continued to be in a romantic relationship with Damarcus, allowing him to watch Ezekiel alone at times. So she stayed with him for a bit of hanky-panky, and look at what that resulted in. You cheeky devil. The children's first response team was aware that Damarcus was left unsupervised with the child and did nothing about it. Damarcus claimed in an interview that he had been living with Swaziki for around a month. How could a team dedicated to protecting children allow for the innocent child to be left with a violent man who had a history of child mistreatment? Furthermore, why did it take all these agencies for the mother to act somewhat? She still allowed Damarcus to be with the child, but she didn't have the own foresight to say, "Bye, Marcus." So on May the 18th, around 1:45 p.m., Swaziki left for a doctor's appointment with a social worker from the child's first response team. This social worker's name is Pidad Mink. His name is spelled Pidad, so I'm going to call him Pidad. Now, Swaziki was supposed to take Ezekiel to this appointment, but ensured Pidad that Damarcus had watched the baby many times before and that he would be okay. Surprisingly, Pidad was okay with this and left Ezekiel behind. Albert Slicker, another social worker, was also at the residence checking in on the family. He checked on Ezekiel in the main bedroom, where the child was laying on a bed with a near-empty bottle in his left hand, wearing a light blue and brown striped jumper and a diaper. He was sleeping peacefully. Albert quietly checked his body for bruises as he slept when Damarcus was out of the room, but he didn't see anything suspicious. Albert also noticed that the house was somewhat messy. There was a full ashtray in the room where the baby slept, and Albert encouraged Damarcus to clean up the mess, so that the baby would not be exposed to that kind of environment. And aside from the ashtray, Albert, this genius, saw no issues and claims Damarcus treated Ezekiel as his own son. Albert even said he had watched TV with Damarcus striking up casual conversation. Albert left the boy alone in the house with a violent person while Swaziki was at the appointment. So, then an unknown friend of Damarcus and Swaziki was over and also saw no issues with how Damarcus was treating the child. So around 3 p.m, this friend left. Damarcus and Ezekiel were going to take a nap together because the boy was feeling sick and irritable. So then around 4 p.m. is when Swaziki returned with Piedad. Swaziki was going to the doctor to see if she was pregnant. Upon finding out that she was not, she was relieved, as was Piedad. Swaziki had told Piedad that she did not even know Damarcus's last name. Piedad wondered how the 21-year-old could have a child with someone she barely knew, and encouraged her to get out of the situation, as she did not know Damarcus well enough for him to stay permanently. So when they returned home, Piedad helped inform Damarcus that Swaziki was not pregnant, which he did not enjoy hearing. Damarcus became visibly upset at the news, becoming cold towards Piedad. The social worker ensured the child was okay, and saw him sleeping on the bed still with the bottle in his hand. Now, sometime between 4:30 and 10:30, this friend had returned. He didn't report any mistreatment he witnessed firsthand. Around 10 p.m, Swaziki was playing with Ezekiel and feeding him. The baby was bouncy as ever, happy to be interacting with his mother. She saw no issue with him and he was in good spirits, as usual. She said sometimes he was fussy, but nothing out of the ordinary. He had been taking medication for an ear infection because of multiple health conditions that Swaziki suffered, including cervical cancer. She had to take medications that upset her stomach immensely. Once Ezekiel was back down for quiet time, she went to the bathroom for over an hour. And between 11 and 11:15, Damarcus began to bang on the bathroom door saying, "The baby isn't waking up." Sometime between when Swaziki went to the bathroom and when Damarcus began knocking on the door, Damarcus had callously tossed Ezekiel into a dresser, causing blunt force trauma to his abdomen, making it distended and bruised. He flung him so hard that it broke a clock on the top of the dresser, causing plastic pieces to fragment across the room. He was angry at the mother and decided to take it out on the helpless baby. He also used an unknown blood object on the child, causing lacerations to his liver and spleen. Wow. He grabbed him hard on his right thigh and right arm, leaving large red handprints in his rage. At some point, he must have struck him over the head as well, since he had cuts and bruises in the hairline of his forehead. Swaziki rushed out and Damarcus took the child into the living room on the couch and attempted CPR. Swaziki was not aware at this point that her child had been savagely mistreated, only that he was not breathing. That is when Swaziki ran out of the house, not knowing what to do. She ran to her sisters who lived next door and broke down. She couldn't stand the thought of her son crying. Multiple neighbors and friends attempted CPR on the child, but it was of no use. He was far too gone by the time the ambulance got there. Swaziki and Damarcus both agreed to go in for questioning after Ezekiel was taken to the hospital. Swaziki also consented to the house being searched. Detectives on the scene noticed the house was visibly dirty with clothes spread out on the floor, evidence of smoking inside. There were stains on the curtains and walls, and roaches and bugs crawling everywhere. They removed a pair of orange shorts belonging to the boy, stained with blood, from his crib. At first, when questioned, Damarcus had told the detective that his name was Willie Kirkland, a lie to cover up his identity since he had an outstanding warrant for burglary. When the investigators later discovered his real name, he was then arrested, but not because of the child injuries. He was arrested for the burglary warrant. They were not aware he was the reason for this devastating murder. They were still trying to figure that out. So after the medical examiner and the doctors had confirmed that Ezekiel's death was caused by blunt force trauma, they began questioning Swaziki, Damarcus, the social workers, and all the other witnesses. Now, I do have Damarcus's interview. Take a look.
Stop breathing, and I'm still doing it. I'm still doing it. You're doing the impressions? Yeah, I'm doing this to his stomach.
Yes, it was recorded on a potato. But in the interview, he claimed he had been living with Swaziki for nearly a month and that he sometimes watched Ezekiel alone. Employees at the doctor's office also confirmed that Swaziki showed up without her son that day. In Damarcus' statement, he claimed at first that he checked on the child around 11 p.m. and that Ezekiel was happily playing with his toys in his playpen. When he returned about half an hour later, he saw that Ezekiel lying on his back with a brownish liquid coming from his mouth. Damarcus claimed he thought it was maybe chocolate or another candy the child has gotten into. Damarcus said when he picked up the child, he was breathing, and when he sat him back down, he suddenly stopped. This is when he began CPR. Yeah, because suddenly stopped happens all the time, huh? Moron. Upon further questioning, Damarcus said Ezekiel must have fallen on something, but later he admitted that while he was watching the child, he became frustrated with the mother and attempted to toss the child onto a pillow, instead accidentally throwing him into a dresser. You mistaken the pillow for the dresser. What? When the child began to cry, he patted him on the back to get him to stop. He also said he flicked him on the thigh where there were marks. Only a pat would not have caused the bruising and external injuries that Ezekiel had suffered. See, the baby also showed blunt force trauma on the front side of his abdomen, which was caused by intentionally throwing the baby at the dresser. He also said that Swaziki was not home when this occurred, when clearly she was still in the bathroom. So the question is, what actually happened? But the story continued to be confusing and inconsistent. During Swaziki's interview, she was unaware her child had been pronounced dead. She detailed her experience of coming home, spending time with her son, needing to use the bathroom, and suddenly learning her child was not waking up. She told detectives the father of Ezekiel was not involved in her life and lived somewhere in Alabama. The father was a paranoid schizophrenic and a victim of bipolar disorder. Swaziki herself became pregnant at the age of 18. Only 4 months after her daughter was born, she was pregnant with Ezekiel by the same man. Swaziki admitted later in other interviews that she grew up in the foster system, having been the victim of child SA starting at the age of 7. Swaziki lived a life filled with adversity. Apparently, her mother was not a great advocate for her either. Naturally, someone with so much trauma in their lives may find it hard to raise children in a healthy environment. When asked about why she allowed Damarcus into her life and to stick around, she said, "I just like staying in corners. I like being by myself in dark rooms, all quiet. I still like that." Whatever that means. Swaziki said Damarcus was extremely romantic at first, a charmer. He stole her heart with flowers and acts of kindness, gaining her trust before he would later murder her son. Wow, that's powerful. Let me paint another picture for you. Imagine it's Valentine's Day, right? I get to know you, I take you out on a date. Yeah? Now, I live by Washington, D.C. What restaurant is good? There's a restaurant nearby called La Vie. Excellent restaurant, great for a date. So imagine we go there, I get the lamb chops, you get, I don't know, chicken or something, have a great time, and it's going well. I move in with you, you have kids, and then that very person who took you to that restaurant, the flowers and the kindness, ends up murdering your son. What the fuck? See, her family was not always on board with their relationship, nor were the neighbors who always claimed that Swaziki was a great mother. They were not so sure about Damarcus. Supposedly, they had broken up and gotten back together about a month before Ezekiel was murdered. Swaziki's mother, she said, he didn't really have nothing going for himself. I think he was threatening my daughter and she wasn't saying anything. Ezekiel's grandma had just started taking him to church and was trying to teach him how to pray. Swaziki was known for being a quiet girl, and she didn't want to upset Damarcus about anything in case he became violent. Swaziki's sister, Yoni, also said about Ezekiel, "You can just tell when a child has been mistreated. I don't understand why they would do this to him." She also claimed she had seen marks on her sister before as well. It's tragic that the state seemed to care more about the daughter than Ezekiel. Had they also taken the young boy, perhaps he would have survived. It's astounding, actually, that the CPS tried to remove Ezekiel on many occasions, but the Attorney General Pam Bondi, refused to have him removed. Pam later admitted that they dropped the ball on the incident, a mistake that cost the baby his life. What do you mean drop the ball? Bollocks. Damarcus had been unsupervised both times the children were physically assaulted, so it never seemed to occur in front of Swaziki. Even though Damarcus admitted to throwing him against the dresser and swatting him on the back, Dr. Mainland, at the medical examiner's office, upholds that the bruises and lacerations on Ezekiel's head, upper body, arms and legs must have been caused by Damarcus assaulting him with a blunt force object rather than the throwing of his body. See, when the previous daughter was being mistreated by Damarcus, Swaziki told the authorities her daughter was clumsy and she must have fallen down the stairs. She was purposefully ignoring the signs that her children were in danger because she was afraid of conflict. The young girl had been taken to the hospital due to her injuries caused by Damarcus, which ultimately led her to being taken away. Swaziki even ignored the safety plan put into place to keep Ezekiel safe. Why would she do this, knowing she had just had her daughter taken away because of this dangerous man? As I said, hanky-panky. Swaziki was still allowed regular visitations with the young girl while she was in the foster system. Damarcus was known by many names, however: Slim, 6'9", and Willie Kirkland. In fact, Damarcus was 6'10", so you can only imagine when he got angry what kind of towering person he must have been. And why did he get so angry when he learned Swaziki was not pregnant? Did he intend to trap her? The story gets more confusing when investigators are tipped off by Miss Hicks and a girl only known by the name Jamaica. Miss Hicks called detectives at Hillsborough County and told them she had video evidence proving Damarcus didn't do this. Miss Hicks refused to give any further clues about her identity. She also told detectives she would not turn in the video evidence and that they had to meet her in person to go over it. 2 days later, they met with this anonymous Miss Hicks at her house and watched a video, supposedly showing Swaziki admitting that her family had hurt the child, not Damarcus. In the video, the mother claimed she left Ezekiel with her sister. So why did Damarcus admit to mistreating the child if that is the case? Both stories could not be true at the same time. Was Miss Hicks, a friend of Damarcus, trying to get him off the hook? We still don't have the answers. As for the other female, Jamaica, she never spoke to detectives, but was part of the story according to a neighbor and friend. She told him Swaziki told her Ezekiel had been food poisoned. But this again was a dead end. There was no proof of this. In fact, the medical examiner even said the injuries occurred well before the death. So it's clear Damarcus and Swaziki were covering up a lot. But regardless of all the mixed up stories, Damarcus was found guilty in a trial by jury and sentenced to life in prison. He was charged with first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. The investigators took only 15 days. A Secretary of State at the Department of DCF said the presence of Damarcus should have triggered a crisis response. Their failure to recognize the danger is another stepping stone toward Ezekiel's death. Bit late for that, isn't it? Swaziki denied that Damarcus ever hit her and said she did not believe he would hurt her kids. She admitted to disobeying the ordered safety plan because she did not think anything would happen. The failure to acknowledge the danger Ezekiel was in on the account of the mother and the social workers and of course the Attorney General all led to the untimely and vicious murder of the child. But of course, if someone had stepped in, especially after his sister was taken away, his death could have been prevented. How could a mother allow a man to stick around who had done this to her daughter, had her taken away, and then Ezekiel died? Is she just as guilty? Just a tragic case, but as I said in the beginning, the story of Ezekiel Mathis had to be told. Torn liver, ruptured spleen, broken spine. Comment, tell me what you think.